Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, also known as WRTI 407 on the GMRS side of things. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Wouxun KG-935 Golf. This is a radio I've been looking forward to reviewing ever since I got my GMRS ticket. Of course, the first radio I got was the Baofeng UV9 Golf. And that represents one portion of the market. But what I was really interested in seeing is what the things look like at kind of the higher end of things. Because in terms of Baofeng economics, which a lot of people tend to use in evaluating cost of radios, it's not a fair mathematical or scientific calculation, but a lot of times when you talk about the price of a radio, people immediately equate that to how many UV5Rs you could buy for that amount. So the UV9G goes for about 44 bucks and the KG935 goes for 144. So this is 3 Baofengs. Is it 3 times better than an individual UV9 Golf? I'm going to say that that's a decision you'll have to make, and it really comes down to your own personal standards, priorities, and expectations. If I was a person looking to outfit a lot of people with a lot of radios for the least amount of money, the UV9 Golf is definitely the way to go. It's a radio, it works, it's not the best radio, it's definitely got its problems, but it's a functional radio that is good to go as far as a pass-out radio. And that's my primary interest in it, was if I've got to buy a bunch of radios for friends and family to have available for a problem time, the UV9 Golf, I can buy a whole lot of these for a lot less than I can buy a whole lot of these. But as a personal radio, something that I'm actually going to be using and be inclined to use, it's going to be this. Because as far as I'm concerned, for my own personal standards, like I said, if I need to buy a lot of radios, I'll buy a Baofeng. If I want to buy a good radio for myself, I'm getting something like this. It will do everything the Baofeng UV9G does. It'll do more things than the Baofeng UV9G does, and everything that it does is better than the UV9G. It just is. The quality of the switches, the functions, the available memory channels, the battery, everything is better on every level than the UV9G. So if you're looking for a very good GMRS HT, this is what you want to go for. And as the review continues, I'll try to make the case for that. Now, are there other higher-end GMRS radios that are good? I'm not certain about that. This is something I'm still in the research process on. I found some stuff that costs as much, but they don't seem to possess near the number of features that the KG935 does. So I think this is going to thin out the market. And until the big 3 get involved, Wouxun kind of owns the higher end GMRS market. Now, do I think Kenwood and ICOM will get into GMRS? I doubt it. Yaesu might, but I'd be real interested to see what they enter the market with. Yaesu's been doing so much bizarre stuff lately. I'm not filled with confidence on that. I think Wouxun's going to own the market on this for a good long time. So let me go over the basic specs on this radio, and then I'll kind of do a breakdown of, take a tour of the radio and show you kind of how it works. So I guess where we can start is what it is. It's a GMRS radio, and what that means is it's a monoband transceiver, and that band is UHF. And what I mean by that is this will only transmit, it'll receive dual band, but it will only transmit in a very specific range, and that range being from 462.550 megahertz to 462.725 megahertz, which is the range of frequencies allotted to GMRS. That is it. It will not transmit anywhere else, and I'm not aware of any kind of Mars mod or anything that could be done to this to make it do anything other than that. In terms of receive, it will receive from 136 to 174.995 megahertz, and that is your VHF range. And it will receive 400 to 479.995 megahertz. So it'll do VHF, UHF. It'll also do FM broadcast radio. So if you want to listen to some easy listening music or some yacht rock when you're up on the trails, you got it if you can pull in a channel. In terms of what this channel allocations and memories and whatnot. This has 999 memory slots, but it comes pre-programmed according to the manual with 30 GMRS channels. Now they follow the next line by saying 8 built-in GMRS repeater channels. It's not programmed with 38 memory slots. It is 22 simplex GMRS channels, and it is the 8 GMRS repeater channels that are plugged in. And of course they follow the same standard channel to frequency scheme that I mentioned in the last video via Part 95 Echo, and it's the same channel scheme from this radio to this radio. So GMRS 5 on this radio resolves to the same frequency as GMRS 5 on this radio, and that's very important. I made a whole video on it. It was the topic of the last video, really pointing out that that's important, that you maintain that channel scheme and you don't vary from it at all. You have to refer in GMRS in terms of channels, and don't mess with that. But beyond that, given that it has 999 memory slots, you got 969 menus or menu items that memory items that you can play with beyond that. So what would you program in here? I'd program in terms of, and again, these are monitoring, not transmit channels. In terms of monitoring, I'd monitor local ham frequencies. I would monitor, obviously, public safety. And within public safety, and this is fodder for a completely separate video, there are some channels within the government that you're going to want to always have on your radio. And they're channels people don't normally think, or they don't immediately come to mind, such as your public works, your parks department, and your road department in your city and your county. A lot of times when something weird is going on, you got a road closure or there's been a fire or some kind of disaster or something, those are the people that they're calling to do the heavy lifting to help solve the actual physical problem of whatever damage has been done in the roadway or whatnot. And those people also know nothing about OPSEC, so they gossip and chat on the radio like you wouldn't believe. So you pick up a lot of good intel off of that. But suffice it to say, you've got a lot of available memory channels to plug a lot of good stuff in there. There's also NOAA weather channels. You have a NOAA weather alert here. Within the radio, you have the ability to do all of the things that you're normally used to doing. You can adjust your power levels. You can adjust whether or not you're wide or narrow band on your channels. And I'll kind of cover these features as we roll through. But the next thing I want to talk about is weather resistance. Now, this... Oh, before I get to that, 5.5 watts output power. And I am going to, the next video I do relative to this, I will do, and I'm trying to do this with all of my radio reviews, I will do an output power test and an antenna test on this. So that'll be a follow-on video. But getting back to weather resistance, obviously not obviously, in case you didn't know, the UV9 Golf claims IP67 weather resistance, and that means submersible to a depth of 1 meter for 30 minutes. Whether or not that's actually, well, we kind of know. It doesn't always, well, so far I don't think anybody's got it to go the full 30 minutes. It'll resist once submerged for a bit. And to be honest with you, as I've said before, I just want a radio that's going to survive a really decent rainstorm. I don't like rain or inclement weather taking out my comms. So that's primarily what I'm looking for. Anything beyond that is just additional protection. The KG-935, usually IP54 is a little bit of spray, a little bit of Windex bottle going on the radio, but the KG-935 is IP66, and that's direct spray. What we mean here is you can effectively take a water hose and just let her fly, and the KG-935 will resist that. That's what I'm looking for. A very short dunk, like dropped into a puddle and immediately scooped out, or a decent amount of rain, that's what I want to prevent against, and the KG-935 is going to do that for me. So that answers that and tells me it's an outdoor cat that can be used in bad weather. So let's start going through the functions of the radio and kind of break down what I like and what I don't like. And I'm trying to set up a standard method where I start with the volume and on-off switch and then kind of work counterclockwise around the radio to prevent going off on tangents, which, as you know, I will do. So the first thing I'm going to note are on-off volume control. As you can see there, my splash screen gives me my voltage. Now, the default splash screen on the radios that came from the factory was a Wouxun logo with that little beep. Now I can't get rid of that beep. That's the one sound I can't make this radio stop doing. I like my radios to be silent. But the way I set this up is so that on power on, and as you see here, FT60 is the same way. I have all my radios set up, or at least if they're possible would be set up that way, so that when I turn it on, I see I've got 7.3 volts on this FT60. I know that's not going to be good to go for the day, so I'm going to turn that radio off and throw it into the charger. Why that is, who knows, but it's low. And actually the reason it's low is I did a video yesterday and I left the radio on the desk. So it's been sitting on the desk for a day and a half now. Still 7.3 volts. Tells you the FT60 will stick in there for a bit. But on this radio, of course, I set this up so when I turn it on, it gives me my DC voltage. Now, next thing, volume and channel control knob at the top of the radio. Initially, I'm tickled to death over this because that's what I'm looking for. As I've mentioned in all of my previous reviews, I like to have a separate volume and channel control knob on the top of the radio so that I can adjust those items when the radio's in the pouch. Unfortunately, Wouxun did something goofy in setting up their locking scheme that actually just sort of negates this completely. And I'm not happy about that. And I'll get to that when we get to the front panel portion. The antenna obviously says high gain antenna, and since it's embossed into the antenna, you know it's 100% true. So the antenna is a reverse SMA type. So if you have Baofeng antennas, you can experiment with different antennas. Now this one specifically says, and if you don't know, if you want to know what frequency range the antenna is good for, there's a little ring on the inside, and usually it's written right there, and this says UHF 462 to 467 megahertz. So that tells you this antenna is designed specifically for that frequency range for transmit. Now in transmit, that's a very important factor. On receive, it's not as important. You can have an antenna that's set up for a certain transmit range. It still receives quite well in other bands. And I haven't really done a lot of reception testing on this with VHF, so that remains to be seen. But allegedly, this is a purpose-designed GMRS type antenna. We'll see how well that works in long term, because I'll do a follow-up on this in about 6 months and let you know where we're at. Usually when I review a radio, I've owned it for a couple of years. In this case, I've only had this thing for a few days. So moving to the side of the radio, we have our, don't worry, I'll get to the flashlight in a minute. We have our push-to-talk button in the normal location. Let me turn this off real quick. The push-to-talk button is okay. It's not terrific. It's not a very positive feeling button. It doesn't feel flimsy, whereas the UV9 Golf has a very flimsy, I'm about to break any second kind of feel to it. This doesn't feel that way, but it has a very odd, it's not a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? It has a weird pivot point, like right in the middle. It presses in nicely at the bottom. It presses in nicely at the top. But if you press in at the center, it wants to bias in either direction. So I don't know quite what that is. It's not comfortable for holding down for any kind of long period of time. You really got to apply what feels like an inordinate amount of pressure. You can see how my thumbnail's gone white just trying to hold it down. I don't care for that. I just want a button where it's going to resist being accidentally pressed, but one that has a nice positive clicky feel to it. This one does not have that. Now below that we have a P1 and a P2 button. These are programmable function buttons. I do not remember honestly what the factory settings were for these. I set these up, and it's very easily set up within the front panel programming menu. But I set these up to do a couple of functions that I wanted them to do, and I may modify these as time goes by. I have the P1 button set for a short press. It's a scan. I'll let that go. Exit out of there. Now, something I'm gonna mention, and this came up earlier when I was playing around with this, because I thought I had the front panel locked out. Normally when you're on scan, and every other radio I've ever played with, when you're on scan and it picks up a channel, if you just bump the channel control knob, it'll continue the scan in the direction that you bumped. On this radio, if it's receiving something on scan, you can turn that knob all day long and it's going nowhere. You have to, if you want to get off of that, you have to kill the scan and then turn the channel knob. I don't know why it does that. That's odd. A long press of the scan button will give me a CT CSS scan and a repeater channel. And a long press turns it off, or the exit button turns it off. But yeah, again, short press gives me the scan. Don't know if we're going to get that. Yeah, see, I'm going to turn the knob. Nothing. It's on scan, so it should be moving. But to get out of there, I have to exit the scan, and then I can get off. That's an odd arrangement. I don't know why that is. Okay. Now, the button beneath that, the P2, what I have this program for is the flashlight. Now, I have talked some smack about flashlights on radios, and it's because in addition to being a radio snob, I'm a bit of a flashlight snob. Sometimes I don't see the practical value of some things, and some people will point them out. I'm still not totally sold on the concept, but this one may have won me because I have the P2 button set for a short press is going to turn the flashlight on, a long press is going to turn the strobe on. But check out this flashlight. This thing is incredibly bright. It's a single LED, but as single LEDs go, it kicks ass. It's pretty good, actually. So long press is going to give me strobe, and that's putting out some light. It's enough so that it actually will leave a spot on your eyeball when you turn it off. So that's pretty impressive. So I can maybe see the usefulness in that. So from a flashlight snob, you finally found a flashlight on a radio that makes me happy. Now moving to the front panel, this is where things are going to get a little more intricate and interesting. The locking scheme. Now this is another area of disappointment that I find with the KG-935. Here's how I like to have my radios set up. What I like to do is lock out the keypad so that I can't press anything here other than the lock button and get any kind of function. The reason for that is if it's in a pouch and I'm moving around, might be in a prone position, who knows, if I start bumping these keys, especially on a radio where you can select a channel by bumping a certain sequence of keys, if I bump key number 888 and I have something on channel 888, it's going to change my radio to channel 888, and I don't want that to happen. Or I may bump the band button on an FT60 too long, and now I'm into a bank selection. There's a lot of things that can go wrong by inadvertently pressing these keys. So for a radio that I'm carrying in a pouch, I like to have the front panel locked out. Now, what I do like having beyond that, though, is I want my volume and channel control knob to work, and that's pretty much all I want to work on this. And in other radios, such as the Yaesus, you can select a locking scheme. And Yaesu, for instance, usually has 3 locking schemes that you can select so that when you press that lock button, it'll do certain things. There is no provision for selecting a locking scheme on this. The default lock scheme is you hold the pound key, which is also your lock key, you long press that, and you'll see a key icon show up on the screen at the top. Now, what this does, I start pressing buttons, nothing's happening. So I'm not going to press anything except the lock button and get any kind of a response. The volume will work, but you know what else it locked out? The channel control. So if it's in a pouch and I have the front panel locked out, I also have my channel control locked out. Now admittedly, you change channels a lot less than you change volume, but there are times you're going to change channel, and I don't like that at all. It almost negates the feature, because in order to change a channel, now I have to extract this out and I have to hit my lock button, and now I can change my channel. I'm not thrilled with that locking scheme. Maybe someone at Wouxun will hear, and there might be some firmware update. I don't know. But I think we're stuck with it. Now, I'll move from there, from something I don't like, to something they've incorporated on this that's actually very clever. And I have not seen another radio manufacturer do this. So there's a thing called dual watch, dual receive. The UV9G does that. And the way they have theirs set up, you have 2 lines, 2 channels indicated here, and any transmission that comes in on either channel you will hear. Okay, so if I want to transmit though, so let's say I'm on 9, so the arrow is indicating that's where I'm active. If I press the PTT, I'm going to talk on channel 9. If I have something go on GMRS 15, I will hear that, and I have to press exit to go down to there, and then I can talk. So one problem here though is if I've got conversations going on both channels, I don't have any indication of which channel was talking if I wasn't looking directly at the screen. That'll become important in just a moment. So as you can see right here, we have a single line, single channel indicated. You'll also see that flashing phone there. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But if I want to get that dual watch, dual display set up, all I have to do is press one key. Boom. And that gives me my dual watch, dual display. So now it will hear whatever's on GMRS 18, GMRS 15. Very similar to the UV9G. I have that red main indicator to the right. That's telling me that's the active channel for Talkie Talk. If I need to do GMRS 15, I just press the band button and it'll flip. Now I'm active on GMRS 15. Press it again. Active on GMRS 18. Now any traffic that comes in or any activity, that flashing phone is going to indicate which of these 2 channels was last active. Excuse me. So that's kind of clever. Usually to go from single watch to dual watch, there's a lot of shenanigans you have to do in the menu. Now I'm a bit ambivalent on it myself. I find it to be incredibly confusing when there's a lot of talking going on both channels. But I can see the value, for instance, if you had a primary conversation channel and then you had an admin or command channel as a secondary, that would be a very valuable feature right there. And then you could pretty efficiently move back and forth from one to the other. Beyond this, there's obviously a number of keys that do a number of functions. A long press on the scan button will give you a scan. But our front panel, or rather a menu button, is probably the next most important thing we need to know about. And a short press of the menu gets you to your programming menu. From here, you have your categories and your options. Now, this first category that pops up is squelch, and this is where you would adjust your squelch. So if I want to make an adjustment to this setting, I just press menu, and from here, I just move the channel control knob, and that's going to allow me to adjust the setting. When I get to where I want, I press menu again, and I'm back. If I want to exit out, just press exit. But if we go back in, I want to look at the other selections that I have, or settings, and obviously we have a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of these. That would make a long video even longer. I'll leave it to you, and I may come in later and back clean up on this and show you a few things that can be done here. In particular, I want to do a video showing how to program in a repeater from beginning to end on this so that you can do it in the field. But that kind of wraps up our front panel programming section here. Let me now go to the speaker mic port, show you that real fast. And we are almost there. The speaker mic port is covered and it is gasketed. So in addition to having hard cover, we have a gasket there and it's secured with a screw. And obviously you see a 2-pin connection here, and it is indeed a Kenwood type plug. So that means if you have speaker mics for Baofeng or any of the other cheap Chinese radios out there that incorporate a Baofeng or a K-type plug, this will work. Now, the plug itself is not sealed, so effectively this is no longer IP66 once you remove that cover, something to be aware of and watch for. So we'll unplug this real fast, and I'll replace that later. The next thing I want to get to is the battery. Now, oddly enough, nowhere, I could not find, I'm sure it's somewhere in there, but nowhere in the actual manual could I find any specifications on the battery itself. But we have a latch here with an arrow, and all we're going to do is just follow the directions and push that arrow up. This is a little difficult to do here. And up we go, and it slides out. So within here, we've got our usual specification sticker saying what it is, serial number, on and on it goes, country of origin, etc. On the battery itself, we have a 3200 milliamp battery. Now this is very, very reminiscent although it's not compatible, but it reminds me a lot of the Anytone ATD 868, 878 radios. Big, fat, juicy battery, 3,200 milliamps, megahertz, the 3,200 milliamps. That is a substantial battery for an HT without being overly bulky. This is a fairly fat radio, but it's not overly so. And that's going to be a battery that's going to get you along quite nicely. Now you see our contacts on the back. This does come with a supplied cradle charger. One downside, there is no provision for any kind of external DC input here. The only way that you're going to be able to hook this up to an external power supply is with a battery elimination kit, which they sell as an optional accessory, but it's just a battery shell with a cord on it and a lighter plug adapter. I'll probably end up going ahead and getting one of those, but you don't have the capability you have, for instance, on the ASU radios, of being able to plug in a DC power connection, just set it on the table and run off of that. Belt clip is good. Actually really good. It's the pin is staked. The screws are much larger than you normally see on a belt clip. It's a very solid design. It's not stamped sheet metal. It's actually a bit reminiscent of the cast belt clip mount for like the Yaesu FT70, FT65, that kind of setup. So it's a pretty good belt clip. Easy to take off for use in a pouch, and that's usually a good idea. Take the belt clip off if you're putting it in a pouch. But that's the basic runaround on the radio. Overall, it's a good piece of kit. It's maybe a little more expensive than I think it should be. I think 144 might be ever so high for this. Time will tell. As I mentioned, it does have a couple of things on it that I don't like, but overall, across the board, I'm a fan. It's a decent little radio, so I'll be continuing to play with this, and this will be kind of my go-to piece of kit for a while now. The next video I'll be doing, of course, will be an output power test, because that's going to tell me, are we actually getting that claimed 5.5 watts of output? And because it's a fairly narrow frequency spectrum, that should be consistent all the way across the board. So if we're not doing 5.5 watts all the way across the board, I'm going to be irritated. And I haven't done this test yet, so I actually do not know. But what kind of bugs me a little is this line in the manual where it says up to 5.5 watts of output. I want 5.5 watts, or tell me exactly what it'll do or should do. So I'll let you know on that. Like I said, we'll do an output power test. But with that, I'll go ahead and bring it to a close. As usual, these radio reviews go fairly long, but I try to be as comprehensive as possible. So with that, I'll bring it to a close. Thank you for watching. And like I said, I give this a good to go. I give it a thumbs up. So this is Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, Scott in Southwest Visalia, California, also WRTI 407, wishing you a wonderful day.